Buenos dias. Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of San Antonio. My name is Ruth Castillo. We've been members since 2016, and I have my two wonderful children in our religious education and middle school groups. I volunteer with both the Youth RE and Parents Religious Education Hour as the caregivers and sexuality educators facilitator on First Sundays. And I am so proud to be part of this congregation. Let us begin by acknowledging this geographic place where we are currently located. Yanaguana, the home and unceded lands of the Coahuil Tecan people, many who still live as vital contributors to our community of communities while never being recognized by the federal government. We speak these truths today as one small step towards being a more diverse, inclusive, and multicultural congregation to serve all of San Antonio and Bexar County. At our church, we strive to enact a universal love that binds us in affection, mutual care, and commitment to action for liberation and justice. Our faith is all-inclusive, and all means all. If you are new to us or visiting for the first time today, please fill out a yellow visitor's card. We'd like to get to know you and follow up with you. Wherever you are on your life's journey, we hope you find a place with us. This Sunday, we are welcoming Professor Mario Marcel Salas, a recipient of the Courageous Love Award, to our pulpit. Professor Salas is an author of many books and articles, including his latest, The Alamo, A Cradle of Lies, Slavery, and White Supremacy. He is considered a veteran of the civil rights movement and is an expert in African American history, championing the establishment of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Texas State Holiday, along with other projects promoting the history of Afro-Mexicans, Black Seminoles, and African Americans in San Antonio, Texas. He has been active in politics, serving many roles, including City Councilman for San Antonio, Vice President for the Judson Independent School Board of Trustees, and a 300-year tricentennial commissioner for the City of San Antonio. He is currently the president of San Antonio Community Radio, KROV, and a member of the City of San Antonio Tax Increment Finance Board 11. I have two short announcements. Professor Salas's books will be on sale in the foyer after service. And secondly, today, at 12:15 in the Fellowship Hall, we will join together for a congressional assembly called Saving Our Democracy. We will build relationships by sharing issues that are affecting you and your family, and we'll learn about steps we can take together to address these issues. Please join us at 12:15 in the Fellowship Hall. Now it is time to turn to one another and exchange a greeting of peace. Say hello to someone you know and don't yet know as a sign of our radical hospitality and joy in being together. Oh no. Gonna be okay. Oh, I'm hoping she's gonna be okay.
Who?
Lilith. If nothing else, she'll come sit up with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. She can sit up here.
Okay.
And when things get too gnarly, you just hit the chime, sound the bell, and stand up. We're gonna stand up and sing. We're gonna sing the whole thing. Can I invite people, if they wish to change out the words sisters and brothers to siblings and cousins?
Siblings and cousins. Yes.
Okay.
Do you want to do that, or you want me to do that?
Yeah. Let's start with a song. Let's start with hymn number 121, We'll Build a Land. And I normally don't like to change the words of an author, but to make the lyrics a little more inclusive, some of us might want to change the words sisters and brothers to siblings and cousins.
And now we have the Danweber family for Chalice lighting. The Danwebers are active members of our congregation for many years. Octavia attends Young Women's Leadership Academy, and Américo attends Esparza Elementary.
We are called as Unitarian Universalists to build the beloved community where all are welcome as blessings. May we strive to share grace and forgiveness with ourselves and each other in the hope of becoming whole and reconciled. Each week we affirm this commitment to live and behave as a community in covenant. Let us now recite our covenant that articulates these promises and binds us together in community, first in English and then in Spanish. The words can be found in your order of service and on the screen.
Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity and fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other. El amor es la doctrina de esta iglesia. Su sacramento es la búsqueda de la verdad.
Y su oración es el servicio. Convivir en paz, buscar sabiduría en libertad, dar a la humanidad nuestro servicio fraternal, para que todas las almas crezcan en armonía con la divinidad. Así pactamos el uno con el otro.
It is time to share our joys and sorrows. Let us reflect, remembering that ours is a welcoming community that connects us, a spiritual community that enlivens us, a sharing community that amplifies our joys, a caring community that hears our sorrows and holds us in compassion. May we listen more deeply, see each other more clearly, and grow closer to each other each time we gather together. All are invited to mindfully come forward down the side aisles and light a candle. Yes. The song will be Isang Lahi by Regine Velasquez. The performer is Rob Saldana, baritone.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I will be singing that song, the next one. Thank you. I'm so sorry. The first one is actually called Tanging Yaman. It's a song in Tagalog from the Philippines, and it translates to only treasure. And I don't want to talk a lot about it, but I just want to let you know that this song is one of the songs I learned as a kid, one of the first songs I learned as a kid, and I ended up singing in my senior recital as Susan Dill's student at UTSA. I just want you to think of that person in your life who's your only treasure, or a group of people who is your only treasure that whenever you see them, you know you cannot live without them. This is Tanging Yaman.
All are invited to mindfully come forward on the side aisles.
Ikaw ang aking tanging yaman na di lubusang masumpungan ang nilikha mong suliak ng iyong kagandahan.
sa tuwina nitong pusong ikaw lamang ang saya. Sa ganda ng umaga, nangungulila sa'yo, sinta. Ikaw ang aking tanging yaman na di lubusang masumpungan ang nilikha mong kariktan. Sulyap ng iyong kagandahan. Ika'y hanap sa tuwina, sa kapwa ko kita laging nadarama. Sa iyong mga likha, hangad pa ring masdan ang iyong mukha. Ikaw ang aking tanging yaman na di lubusang masumpungan ang nilikha mong kariktan. Sulyap ng iyong kagandahan. Sulyap ng iyong kagandahan.
Now it's time to share our joys and sorrows. May we listen more deeply, see each other more clearly, and grow closer to one each another each time we gather together. All are now invited to mindfully come forward down the side aisles and light a candle, returning up the center aisle.
Those boots are made for walking. Let me lift up from the community. A person writes their sorrow that my wife just lost her mother after a 2-year-long battle with cancer. And a person lifts up their joy. I found a better place to live and will be moving in October. Let me know if you need some moving boxes. To be human is to face sweetness, sorrow, and absurdity that arrive in unequal amounts each day. How we meet this world will be made easier by how we meet one another. And how we meet one another will be made easier by how we meet ourselves. And how we meet ourselves will be made easier with each breath. Breathing in and breathing out. Blessed be. Amen. Ashe.
Now it is time for Story Wisdom with Bridget Laughlin. Children may come up to the front.
Come on down. Don't be shy. All right, thank you for coming down. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about our fourth principle. Everyone's pretty familiar with 1 and 7, but the ones in the middle usually get kind of blurry. Does anybody know, first of all, any of the kids, do you know what our fourth principle is? No, not fire. Searching for what is true. That is exactly correct. Amazing. That's the children's version. The adult version is we affirm and promote the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, which is a lot of words. But we're going to talk about the two parts of that, freedom and responsibility. What does freedom mean? Freedom means you're out and about. It could be, yeah, if your body is free, you could be out. Anyone else have any ideas about what freedom means? Zoe? When you're out playing, you're free? Uh-huh. Yeah. When no one's imprisoning you and telling you what to do, yeah. So we're going to have more questions. I'll come back. So in church, freedom here means that we have the freedom to find what is true for us and believe what is true for us. So what about responsibility? That's another big word. What does responsibility mean? Over here. You do something by yourself, okay. Américo? that you remember and do it right. Okay? When you're responsible for other people or things, what is that? What do you do if you're responsible for other people or things? Ooh, you might take the blame if they get in trouble. You might take care of them. Well, as Unitarian Universalists, I am really grateful for these two things, freedom and responsibility. So I'm going to light a candle in gratitude for our freedom, that we can search for the truth freely and not be confined. And I want to light this second candle in gratitude for responsibility. You know, though, actually, hold on. This kind of looks delicious. What? I can't eat it? But I just did.
Yeah, you can eat it, but it won't taste good.
I don't know. It tastes kind of good. So, how many, excuse me, how many of you thought that I was holding two candles? How many of you thought maybe I wasn't after I took a bite out of it? Maybe it wasn't actually a candle? Your idea of what was true changed because something changed. And that is what it means to be responsible in your search for truth and meaning. We find things, when something new happens, when we find out new information, it's responsible to change our beliefs. So it was actually a turnip made into a candle shape. So as you go out into the world this week and you learn new things, ask yourself, is this true? And then ask yourself, how do I know? So now it is time to go out to our RE classes for all the kids. And you can just follow me and Miss Glenna out, and I'll see you out there.
Our church has a larger purpose to support all of us in becoming more generous in giving of our time, talent, and treasure, all in a context of trust. For those of you viewing online, we invite you to make a contribution on our website or on the link in the chat stream. For those of us in the sanctuary, you may contribute to our church in the baskets being passed by our ushers. Would the ushers please come forward? We welcome back to the stage Rob Velasquez, baritone, as he performs Isang Lahi.
Thank you for having me again here today. Thank you so much for that introduction. Before I sing this next song, I would just like to offer a little bit of a blurb on what it's about. It's called Isang Lahi, and the lyrics of Isang Lahi tell us to let your voice be heard. The sun will illuminate our path of unity, so offer love to each and everyone. And so I encourage you to do that, not just today, but try to do that at every portion of your life, every single day. This is Isang Lahi.
Iisa lang ang ating lahi, iisa lang ang ating lipi. Kung ang tinig mo'y di naririnig, ano nga ba ang halaga ng buhay sa daigdig? Darating ba ang isa ngayon at magbabago ang panahon kung bawat pagdaing ay laging pabulong? Aanhin ko pa dito sa mundo ang mga matang nakikita'y di totoo. May ngiting luha ang likuran at paglahi ang tanong ay kailan. Bakit di natin isabog ang pagmamahal? Sundan mo ng tanaw ang buhay. Mundo ay punan mo ng saya at gawing makulay. Iisa lang ang ating lahi, iisa lang ang ating lipi. Bakit di pagmamahal ang ialay mo? Pag-unawang tunayang siyang nais ko, ang pagdamay sa kapwa'y nandyan sa palad mo. Di ba't ang gabi ay mayroong wakas? Pagkatapos ng dilim ay may liwanag. Araw ay agad nasisikat, iilawan ang ating landas nang magkaisa bawat nating pangarap. Sundan mo ng tanaw ang buhay. Mundo ay punan mo ng saya't gawing makulay. Iisa lang ang ating lahi, iisa lang ang ating lipi. Bakit di pagmamahal ang ialay mo? Pangunawang tunay ang siyang nais ko, ang pagdamay sa kapwa'y nandyan sa palad mo. Sundan mo ng tanaw ang buhay. Mundo ay punan mo ng saya't gawing makulay. Iisa lang ang ating lahi, iisa lang ang ating lipi. Bakit hindi pagmamahal ang ialay mo? Pangunawang tunay ang siyang nais ko, ang pagdamay sa kapwa'y nandyan sa palad mo. Sa palad mo.
We bless these offerings we have received. May we live the true spirit of our UU tradition to be generous and kind to ourselves, the people we know, and the people we have yet to meet. May our blessings be multiplied through the sharing of them. Amen.
Well, I've been here before, and I always enjoy coming here because this congregation embraces the things that many of us have fought for very long periods of time. So I just want to, and I'm going to make it quick and clean. I almost said quick and dirty. Quick and clean. Because I've been told I have about 15 minutes, so I'm going to zoom through this. But I do want to thank the pastors of the church, obviously directors of the church, assistants, and so forth, and the church congregation for having me here today to speak. The title of my sermon or talk is taken from an African-American physicist named Neil deGrasse Tyson, a very famous guy. He has some classes he calls the master class, in which he says he's going to teach people how to think because they don't know how to think. And he's right about that. And his famous quote is, one of the greatest challenges in the world today is knowing enough about a subject to think you are right, but not enough about that subject to know you are wrong. Very, very heavy statement, and I don't think he smokes weed out in the parking lot, so that's a pretty heavy statement. He's high all the time with knowledge. And that statement really helped me to move along in the writing of the book that I just did, called The Alamo, A Cradle of Lies, Slavery and White Supremacy. Because there are many things that we think we know about, and upon closer examination, turns out we don't. And unfortunately, I had somebody the other day tell me, we were having a discussion, and he was telling me, well, I'm going to Google that. I'm going to do my research and Google that. I had to tell him, unfortunately, that Googling is not research. It's a way to get started, but it isn't research. Research is hard stuff. It requires going to museums and libraries and special collections at those libraries to see stuff that you'll never be able to find on a Google search. So it's important that we understand those things. And what comes to my mind is an aspect of critical thinking. And critical thinking doesn't just involve discussing stuff. Most of us know about that, and they're trying to boil out the truth. The Socratic method, some of us call that, and it is. But there's another aspect to the Socratic method in which what we try to do is boil out the truth by understanding the type of questions that are raised. So you could have a question that is one system, meaning simply, well, let me do this. A system is a field of study, whatever your major is or was in college, or your interest. A system is a field of study in which you try to learn all of the basics of that particular system. So if it's mathematics, you're trying to learn the basic mathematical tenets of math, or chemistry, or biology, or whatever it may be. That's a system. So a one-system question is one that only has one answer. So what's the capital of Texas? Well, there's only one answer, unless you've had too much whiskey. It's Austin. How much is 2 + 2 + 2? Well, it's 6. There's only one answer. Unless you're, a shrewd fellow and you're trying to play a mathematical fallacy on me. Well, I know about those too. 2 + 2 + 2 is 6. Your opinion doesn't matter in a question like that because that's not a question that requires an opinion. It's a question that requires fact. Then the other kind of question, there's 3. The second kind of question is a no-system question. Well, that's who is your favorite singer? Is it Beyonce or Lady Gaga or who is it? What's your favorite color? What's your favorite movie? And what you think is your favorite may or may not be mine or yours, right? I may think the movie you think's the greatest movie ever made is just worthless. So that requires personal opinion and no system to look at. And let me tell you, there's got to be at least two types of understandings, two types of opinions. And I had to point this out to one of the former Texas officials when he got up and criticized people who were criticizing the Battle of the Alamo. I told him there were two kinds of opinions: willy-nilly, silly opinions, and those that are well thought out and reasoned. And of course, I accused him of the first one. Willy-nilly, silly. So that's two. The third one is a conflicting systems question in which there's more than one answer because it's a complicated question. Well, why'd they fight the Battle of the Alamo? It's a complicated question. In high school, in public school, you know, I was a public school teacher for 20 years, and then a professor for 20 years. So I've done kindergarten all the way to university. And I clearly remember in school being taught pretty much one way, that the question of the Battle of the Alamo is a one-system question with only one answer. Well, they were fighting against the dictatorship of Santa Anna. And you're supposed to walk away with that as if you've received some golden pot of knowledge. Well, that's a complicated question. So when you look at the disciplines that are on a wheel of knowledge, so to speak, I would answer that question by saying, well, let's look at that from an economic point of view. Let's look at it from a historical point of view. Let's look at it from a religious point of view, because the majority of the Alamo defenders were Protestants from slave-owning states, whereas Mexico is a Catholic country. Wow. And those two have been fighting each other horribly for over 500 years before those settlers ever got here. So how'd those settlers come? Did they just decide to jump in a covered wagon one day and let's go for a ride? No, because they needed or wanted land. They wanted wealth. And the cost of land in Tennessee, for example, was too much for them to afford. They could come here, and at one time, and it depends on what time and so forth, you could buy an acre of land for 6 cents, later on 12 cents. Sometimes you could get it free. And sometimes, like Jim Bowie, you could just squat on it and claim you own the title to it and sell fake deeds of property to people, unbeknownst to them. So, you look at that. So, what's going on in Tennessee? Why'd they come here? By the way, in eastern Tennessee, there were a lot of whites who opposed slavery, and in some cases, actually ran the slave owners out of eastern Tennessee. So in some places, they have forced to leave and come to Texas. So thinking you know enough about a subject to think you're right, but not enough to know you're wrong, is crucial in understanding these bigger pictures. So I would look at that. I would look at economics. 12 cents an acre, 6 cents an acre. I would look at history, the anti-slavery movement in Tennessee. I would look, and these are just small examples of a huge picture. I would look at religion. I would look at mathematics. I'd like to know how many slaves existed in Tennessee, who brought how many slaves with them from Tennessee or Kentucky or Virginia or wherever, how many came with them. I would look at the political history of Mexico and look at Mexico's black president. Most people don't know they had a black president. Vicente Guerrero was the black, his birth certificate says mulatto, the black president of Mexico, the second president of Mexico. He's the one who abolished slavery, 1829. So we're looking at the dynamics that would have made slave owners coming into Texas, which was northern Mexico, very upset. Because they came here, they were dirt poor, most of them. They came here to get wealthy. And you could only do that by owning land, and slaves. And let me tell you, what gets me is sometimes conservatives talk about how lazy poor people are. The laziest people in the world were slave owners. They didn't want to do any work. They wanted to pass on a system so their kids wouldn't have to work. And they actually said that in the primary source documentation. Lazy people. And then some folks have the nerve to call other folks lazy. The history of slave owners in this country is laziness 101. Why do they fight the Battle of the Alamo? Well, economics, political science, religion, geography. Obviously, the geography of this part of the world is better for growing cotton than up north, where it's colder. So geography plays a role. And that's why sometimes when professors are asked a question, you know what our response is? Yes and no. Or do you have an hour to discuss that? Because it's a difficult, complex question. It's not one that you can answer just like that. And so knowing the difference between a simple question and a complex question is very, very important. In public school, you're generally, unless you had a good teacher, but you're generally not taught to think critically. So what happens? Well, you grow up thinking a lot of people were great men. You grow up thinking that people like Kant, right, great philosopher, he's quoted all the time. He made some very ugly comments. And you can't say that some of these people were men of their times. You can't say that because there were men and women above their times. There were men and women who rejected the times. If you want to use, you can use whoever you want. Martin Luther King rejected and stood above the times. John Brown, famous white abolitionist, he rejected the times. But those people didn't get to write the history books. The people who were interested in wanting everyone to think what they said is correct wrote the history. Voltaire, the famous philosopher, racist. The people, by the way, if you're still calling yourself Caucasian, you need to get another name. That race was invented by Johann Blumenbach in the 1700s. There was no such thing as a Caucasian unless you were talking to someone from the Caucasus region in Russia, which, by the way, they're a tiny bit darker than ethnic Russians. What an irony. Caucasian, the term doesn't exist until Blumenbach invents it. Okay? He invents 5 races. There's a list of them. You can Google that if you want. Be careful about Googling, but you can Google that if you want. Linnaeus is another guy, racist. He invented, him and Blumenbach, the term we now know as scientific racism. They applied science falsely to people's ethnic group, ethnic category. I don't like to use the word race, and we ought to stop using it. Don't ask anybody what race they are. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It's a social construction. But look, I don't like to just say that. It's a social construction. However, once invented, it poisoned the world. Racism poisoned the world, and the fathers of racism are some of these guys that we hold up in high esteem. Even some of the people that we think are so great, John Locke, he's quoted in political science realm all the time as a guy, who believed in different things, democracy and so forth. But he was an investor in the African slave trade. So we're going to talk only about that part and completely ignore what else he stood for. That's the way the game is played in a society that believes in white supremacy. The idea is to uplift people in a white supremacist system and ignore the bad that they did. Just ignore it. It's not important. Just cut it out. It is important. So, and one guy even invented a machine. I'm still looking at the clock, y'all. One guy invented a machine called facial angle, right? Imagine that. He'd draw a line perpendicular from the nose to the jawbone and then measure this line here, right? And if it's 80 degrees, you're white. If it's 70 degrees, you're black. And those of you who grew up hearing that black people are monkeys, this is where they get it from, because then he measured the facial angle of an orangutan, which is 58 degrees, and then he says, well, there you go. Black people are closer to apes than whites are. He's the one that invented this racial hatred. We know his name. Peter Camper, we know his name. So, and some of us are concerned about, and people like Mark Twain. Mark Twain, he wrote some good stuff. He seemed to like black people, but he hated the Sioux Native Americans, even called for their extinction. That's erased from history, right? Well, I'm a professor, so I'm putting it back in. I'm putting it back in. We are told they didn't have any big slave plantations in Bexar County. Oh, yes, they did. At one time, the Cibolo Creek was in Bexar County. It's not now, but it was at one time. One of the biggest slave plantations in Bexar County was on the Cibolo Creek. The slave owner was named Brahan. There's a street named after him right off of Broadway, across the street, roughly from where Lions Field is at. That's where one of his slave plantations was located, right there. And he owned a whole bunch of slaves on the Cibolo Creek. So we didn't have large-scale slavery in Bexar County? Yes, we did. And it's up to people to discover these things that they have so skillfully tried to hide. Now, we're not trying to make, and this makes me so upset when the governor and other people say things like, we don't want to teach anything in school that makes white people feel bad. Well, if you're a racist, I guess you ought to feel bad. If you're an anti-racist, no big deal. Somebody exposed the fact that Beto O'Rourke had a relative back in the past who owned slaves. You know what he said? Well, that's too bad for him. He's not a good guy in my book. What about all the people that are your ancestors who didn't believe in slavery, some of them in the same family? Erased. You hear about the bad ones, but you don't hear about the good ones. So that's why nobody ought to be upset about that. You ought to be happy to know it, so that you can live your life in a better way, opposed to slavery, opposed to racism in its modern sense. So that's really what's important. So I'm going to close, because it looks like 15 minutes already ran. I can do this all day long. And it's already 12. And I think I started at 11:40. So I wrote that book. And in there I take primary source documentation. I quote of how many slaves Sam Houston owned. I quote the comment by Sam Houston, who said that Mexicans are phlegm. That's Sam Houston, the father of Texas. I erased that. It's like a big eraser, bigger than this building. So nobody will know. It's important that we know the things that have been hidden, erased, and I have an acronym that I use called HOLDE, hold everything. H stands for half-truths, O stands for omissions, L stands for lies, D stands for distortions, and E, erasure. And this is the way history has generally been told. This is what we grew up with, and this is what we have to fix. Thank you. May God bless you.
Our closing hymn, we invite you to please rise and embody your spirit to sing our closing hymn, One More Step, number 168 in the gray hymnal.
Okay, I would ask that you bear with me for the benediction. Heavenly Father, we ask for forgiveness for all of the things we should have said and didn't say, for all of the things that we said and should not have said, for all of the things that we thought should not have thought, for the things that we should have thought and didn't, for the things we did and should not have done, for the things that we should have done and didn't do. We beg forgiveness. Amen.